Hi everyone, it's Nick. Welcome back to my channel. Okay, in today's video, we are going to be talking about things that make your home look dated. Now, listen, okay, we're gonna talk about things that maybe you might have kicking around your home and you need someone anonymously on the internet to tell you that you may want to swap them out. Now, you don't have to. If you love these things, go for it. Because every time I make a video like this, someone goes, you know what's dated, Nick? That clock in your background. And I'm like, oh, you really got me with that zinger in the comment section. But listen, you don't have to change out anything. I get it. You don't have to like my stuff, and I don't have to like your stuff. That's what makes the world great. You know what I mean? Like, you can like what you like. So if you love the things I'm gonna talk about in this video, then go for it. If you love a barn door, which we're gonna get to, keep it. But I'm just saying that maybe these things are looking a little dated, and there's a reason why they're dated, because they were super hot and trendy, and then now they're really not. And you just, hopefully this will be a lesson learned on investing in quality pieces that maybe have a little bit more of a timeless quality to them. But again, if you love them and you still love them, then keep them in your home. But let's get to those items. Okay, so first up on my list is, of course, the barn door. I did a video back in like January 2021, which really honestly launched my channel. I can't believe I'm coming up to 4 years actually on YouTube. Over 3 years since that video came out, but it really sort of kind of launched everything. And I don't really know if it was such a hot take to go after farmhouse, which I did in that video, but you know, it really resonated with people. I don't know, we were all stuck inside in the pandemic, people were renovating, and it just seemed to catch on, and people thought that something needed to be said about the Hobby Lobby signs. And I went for them, and it seems to have resonated. Comment, by the way, if you're a person who subscribed from that video, because you've been with me for a long time. But listen, the barn door specifically, why don't these work? Well, I think they're looking a little dated because that style overall is looking particularly dated. Modern farmhouse was always a really challenging style to make work because it lacked context. Usually you don't live in a barn. That's kind of the short answer. You don't live in a barn. That's why it doesn't make sense. But the long answer is it lacks context. Like, you don't live anywhere probably even need a barn, because you know, you probably live in the suburbs of Seattle or something, and nowhere near a barn. There's not a barn in sight. And so I think that really is what made this style to be particularly challenging. And the barn door, of course, is a big part of it, even though I just read that the other day that the Kardashians are trying to move into their modern farmhouse era, and I am not here for it. You know, what's his name? Chris Pratt, the worst Chris. Sorry. Chris Pratt and Schwarzenegger or whatever. They bought a 1950s home in Los Angeles, and they bulldozed it to put up a 15,000 square foot modern farmhouse. So maybe we're not done with this style, but I'm fighting the good fight. Hopefully it comes back in a way that feels a little bit more updated, and again, has a little bit more of a, I don't even know. Can you have a sense of place when you're in a rich, fancy area in Los Angeles and you're putting in a farmhouse? I don't know, but let's see what happens. But this style in particular is looking quite dated, I think, at this point, and the barn door is sort of the symbol, I think, of it all. Now, I'm gonna try to, in this video, give you some ideas, or if you're thinking, okay, well then, Nick, what do I do instead? I'm gonna give you some ideas. Pocket doors work particularly well, because the challenge with the barn door too is that oftentimes they're going in spaces where you can't actually put in a swing door, because that's how builders have built a lot of these areas. And it's very frustrating, because you're like, well, I can't put in a door, because otherwise it'll hit the toilet and it'll hit the wall in the other way. So what am I gonna do? Well, a pocket door is a really good answer, or I would say there's a lot of minimalist barn doors that I suppose can look okay. The more farmhousey, like ripped off a barn and put on your suburban home, in my opinion, the worst. That's like the worst of the worst. But you know, some of them can be quite minimal, but still using some of the mechanisms that can make sense for a barn door. I also really hate these on bedrooms, and I really hate these on bathrooms, because they don't cover up sound, and they also don't cover up smell. And therefore, I think they're inappropriate for those use cases. And if that's the case, just, I don't know, bulldoze your whole house at that point, because, no, just kidding. But like, honestly, like, it just is not gonna work for those, just because they're not practical, okay? So this style, we're done, we're over it. I think we're over the barn doors. Let's move on. Okay, next up on my list is gonna be the glass mosaic tile. Okay, glass mosaic tile. So these are very common in backsplashes in kitchens, and these are very common in border tiles that people put in their bathroom. I don't think we need borders in bathrooms anymore. Listen, it's inevitable that's gonna come back, but right now it's not here. And so I don't anticipate it coming back anytime soon, but no doubt some person will bring it back eventually. But for now, no go. And it won't come back in the same way that it did with these glass mosaics. These were incredibly cheap looking and very busy and very distracting. And usually that's not the attention that you're really looking for trying to create in something like a kitchen backsplash, or even into your bathroom or your bathtub sort of scenario. These feel very mid-2000s, mid-late 2000s for sure, which, you know, for some people, they may want to start thinking of changing out their tile depending on when you got them perhaps. People still buy them though. People still sell them. You can go to Home Depot and trust me, there is an aisle full of these all over the place. Usually it's a blend of different tones of brown, but it's just a very, very busy backsplash. And it's not necessarily drawing a lot of attention, I think, in a particularly good way. Now, I will say the alternatives that you're seeing that are really popular right now are going to be to carry the slab from the countertop up to the backsplash. So if you go granite, if you go marble, if you go quartz, if you go whatever you choose to do, laminate, well, maybe not laminate, but you know, like if you're choosing to go with some really, you know, you're going with a stone slab, then carrying up the backsplash, I think, is always a great way to do it. It's very seamless. It feels very contemporary. You're only using the same material, so you don't necessarily have to worry about sort of combining materials in that way. If you are going somewhere for a laminate, or you don't choose to want to put in the same backsplash, and you don't choose to carry it up the side, I honestly think a subway tile or some sort of really basic tile, like a penny round tile or a stacked subway, you don't necessarily always have to do it in the brick pattern, right? You can do vertical, you can do horizontal. I think those are relatively timeless approaches to how you can do tile, and I think it'll always make sense. And I don't think it's gonna date nearly as quickly as something very, very graphic, like which is what you're seeing from these glass mosaics. Okay, next up on my list is going to be lace drapes. So these are the Scream Grandma, but a lot of people still have them. I have a feeling that a lot of people in like sort of a Grand Millennial or even a Maximus style or even something like a Coastal Grandmother style or whatever that are the trendy trends of the moment, design styles of the moment. I think that these, you know, might incorporate these lacy drapery panels or just lace in general. I wouldn't be shocked if people are trying to bring this back, but I would say in their very sort of roughly form, these are very, very dated. Now, these are something still that a lot of people really have, and you know, it might make sense for them, but I just think it has definitely very much a grandma sort of look to it. And in addition, it's oftentimes not always the necessarily most practical. I think if you want to upgrade to something a little bit more contemporary, I would work with something like a linen or a cotton drapery panel. You can do something in a pattern if you so choose. You could do something with a solid. You could do something with a really, really basic print, or even like a two-tone color blocked or something like that. I think those can sometimes really like make the room look smaller, make it a little bit shorter, but those can still look kind of cute. I would say these are really difficult to pull off in a contemporary space. If you are looking to upgrade, I would choose those more sort of solid basic fabrics that aren't necessarily going to detract or draw as much sort of attention as something very, very lacy. But again, you know, as I said at the beginning of the video, if you love it, if let's say your grandma gave you them, or let's say it was passed down or whatever, and it just fits the rest of your style of your space, then absolutely go for it. But in general, in most use cases, this is something that is looking incredibly dated. Okay, next up on my list is gonna be a bulky corner tub. Now, this is where you're moving into something that's a little bit, well, not a little bit, very much a fixed element, right? Very much something that is fixed in place. This feels very 90s. It felt very posh, boomer 90s home where people had these structured into the corner and very difficult to swap out. So these tubs usually come in sort of a very sort of weird shape, and they're usually just sort of like jutting out kind of in the center of the room, and they take up a lot of space in the room. But I would say there are some positives to them. Like they're relatively easy to clean compared to some of the more contemporary solutions that I'm going to talk about in a second. But I do think that they take up a lot of room, and I do think that they look kind of very sort of builder, sort of basic, and just they were very, very popular in sort of the 90s and into the 2000s, and they're not always necessarily, I think, fitting the rest of the room that they're in. So if you are looking to move to something a little bit more contemporary, something like a freestanding tub is definitely feels a lot more contemporary, very, very popular now. And there's a lot of really, really beautiful ones that are out there. You can also, of course, do an alcove tub if that makes sense, depending on how the bathroom is situated. The challenge, I think, is that a lot of these tubs were sort of put in at a time where that was kind of the plan, the space plan that was created for the bathroom, and they don't necessarily fit what is happening in a lot of really contemporary bathrooms or what you've really seen in the last sort of 5 to 10 years, which I think is part of what's really making them look very dated, is because that's just not what people are doing in their bathrooms. That's not how bathrooms are being sort of created these days. That may change. It's kind of something like a sunken living room, right? Like people created a lot of those sunken living rooms in the 90s, and then now people just don't build living rooms the same way that they did back in the 90s. And so they're looking dated kind of for that reason. They can be challenging to update in that way. If you don't want to change it because you like it, then you don't have to necessarily change it. I would say my advice for there would be to sort of maybe just change out some of the materials around the tub. So, maybe if you wanted to keep the corner tub, knowing it's a little bit of a dated look, but if you want to say clad the outside in something like a natural stone or more interesting tile than those glass mosaics I just talked about a minute ago, then I would say do that. But if you are looking to do an extensive renovation, swapping this out for something like a freestanding or an alcove tub is gonna make a lot more sense for most people. Okay, and then next up on my list is going to be rose gold. Rose gold was so popular in sort of the what did we say, mid 2010s? I think that was when that was the peak rose gold. Rose gold is an interesting metal. I've gone on record, I don't really buy into a lot of the metal trends. I don't really love, metals are metals. Like, I think sometimes people get really caught up with chrome versus matte black versus rose gold versus brass versus whatever. The truth is that these things just sort of, I think it's more important that you find a metal that is gonna make sense for the rest of your color palette and your design style and the rest that what you have in the space, right? Like, if you like to choose something that is sort of very warm and you're looking for a very sort of cozy, you're looking for something antique, then something like antique brass or an unlacquered brass might make a lot of sense. If you're looking for something very modern, then maybe something like jet black or matte black might make sense for you. If you want something in a cooler tone, maybe you've got blues and grays and things, maybe chrome might make a lot more sense. You know what I mean? It's less about necessarily following the hot trendy sort of metal of the moment. And somewhere along these metal trends, rose gold was roadkill. So rose gold was super popular in the I think in the 2015 sort of era. And it was sort of an interesting hybrid of like brass and copper, you know, like it didn't have that same sort of timeless quality that copper has, but also didn't have necessarily the same warmth that you're gonna get from something like brass. And so we were left with this kind of weird hybrid version, which was rose gold. It's usually very, very shiny. It's usually very pink and rosier than your copper, I would say. But it was very, very popular for a while. We saw it in lighting fixtures, of course. We saw it in decor pieces. Like, we really saw it all over the place. And now I think it just feels a little bit like it was never a natural sort of color tone that you necessarily see in nature, like something like brass or something like brushed nickel or something like that. So it was never, didn't have sort of that anchor of feeling like an honest sort of natural metal like you see in other sort of metals that are out there. And so it always kind of felt like it never really found its place. It just felt very, very trendy and hot in the moment. And sometimes that's, I guess, a caution towards being kind of sucked into some of these things that feel super popular and super trendy, but always feel impractical and never really feel like it's really rooted in kind of an honest material choice. Does that make sense? And I feel like that's where rose gold went wrong. So alternatives to rose gold, I mean, if you love the warmth of rose gold, but you kind of maybe want to lean a little bit more into something in the yellow department, then something like brass would make a lot of sense. People have often said brass is popular, then it's not, then it is. But again, brass is a material that's been around for a very long time. It always will. Something like bronze, those material choices have been around for a very long time. If you like that sort of orangey, coppery sort of color, I would say going with copper might make sense. Now, it might not make sense for a lot of your bathroom fixtures or whatever, but for something like in a kitchen or some pulls or something, little touches of copper, it might make sense if you actually do enjoy it. Or again, if you love rose gold, then just keep it, because, you know, do you have to get sucked into the next metal trend? No, just, you know, if you went all in on the rose gold, you know, it might not necessarily be as trendy here in 2024, but that's okay if you still love it, but just something that, you know, someone needed to tell you, I guess. Okay, so that's it for me for today, guys. I hope you really enjoyed this video. Let me know if you liked this one. I'm really curious to hear if you agree or disagree. People always do. They always love to disagree in the comment section, and I love to read it. So let me know, and I will see you all in the next video. Thanks. Bye.